South Africa is facing a humanitarian crisis. Widespread flooding has devastated parts of Limpopo, Mpumalanga and KwaZulu-Natal, the Northwest too, and the Eastern Cape. Wildfires continue to rage across the Western and Eastern Cape. Thousands of households have been displaced, losing homes, livelihoods, and access to basic necessities. Women and children are particularly vulnerable, and communities are hit the hardest. In response, a coordinated national relief effort has been mobilized, led by the South African Council of Churches and the National Department of Human Settlements, working with NGOs, faith-based organizations and the private sector. This afternoon, we speak to representatives from these organizations to understand how relief is being coordinated, how communities can access help, and how the public can assist in the national effort to support those affected. Joining us are representatives from the South African Council of Churches, Reverend Mzwandile Molo, as well as Advocate Thando Gumede from the South African Women in Dialogue. Reverend Molo, good afternoon. Thando, thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate it. And I want to start with you, Reverend. It is during times of crisis, times of vulnerability, times of devastation, when it is expected for the church to step in, to not just support spiritually, but to also support in rebuilding communities. And that seems to be the call that you had answered to. But there are more crises than there are those able and willing to help in South Africa, unfortunately. How difficult has it been to coordinate such an effort?
Good afternoon, Oliver, and good afternoon to the viewers throughout the country. Firstly, allow me, Oliver, to express our own sense of condolences, the SABC, to those families and those people who have gone through such a devastation. Because we know, as people who are close on the ground with many churches who are connected with these communities, that this is not only an inconvenience, this is almost setting people back, the lives that are lost, but also the economic devastation that comes with it, because people have built their homes with the last cents that they had. Now they must begin from scratch, not only to survive the catastrophic event, but to build up whatever resilience that they have. I want to say on behalf of the church leaders of South Africa, we keep them in our prayers. And the issue you raise around how difficult it has been, we as the church makes the call, because in every community there is a church that exists, and even before we make the call, many of our churches on the ground respond into what they see. The call that we are trying to make now is to make sure that our response is a coordinated one rather than sporadic, that comes from individual churches who do what they need to do. Because once you do it sporadically, we can cause confusion, we can flood other zones with too much of what is needed in other zones. So the idea, therefore, is to work within ourselves as member churches of the SABC, but also to work with others like Sawit into trying to make sure that our response is a coordinated one and is impactful at the right pace, at the right area, and with the right level of focus. And we're encouraged by the response that our people have made up to now.
And how many of your council members have raised their hands and say, we have some resources, we have a little bit extra in our pockets, we want to come forward?
And many of them won't say they've got extra, Oliver. They will simply say, we've got something to give, we've got something to share. And Oliver, for the information of people, the SABC is made up of 27 national churches. And because we're made up of 27 national churches, the Methodists will respond, the Anglicans will respond, the Presbyterians will respond, the Catholic will respond. So there are quite a variety of them. And they respond at different levels, as I indicated. I, as a Methodist, I'm coming from my own church this morning. I know my church will do what it can do from a local church. Then you've got what we call a diocesan, a provincial presence, and that also responds at that level. So there are many people and spaces who make that response, but they're also calling on individuals within the Christian community so that they have compassion from themselves to what the resources that they have as individuals to make those resources available, but also to give time for themselves to walk with people. Because something else, Oliver, when you've gone through this, for something to give you a piece of bread and feed. But in reality, there's emotional, there is psychosocial support that is needed for people to go through this devastation, for people to go through this pain. And we are saying to our local pastors who are closer to the ground, do not just come to give food, walk with people. Where there's a devastation of pain and emotional distress, walk with them, not only in prayer, but holding their hand, in counseling, in engagement. Just imagine if somebody has lost a child, as those, for example, in Thando have done. you are dealing with a deep trauma that is not merely around food. It is about how to survive, how to make life meaningful again. And we are responding at those different levels, Oliver, and our people are doing the best that they can. At the national level, we are doing with SAWID. We are saying to ourselves, we need to find a way to coordinate our response, especially with the category of national disaster. As you have said in our own statement, we are asking, we are pleading with those in government not to abuse these resources. It will be tragic that we hear from after this event that there are people who took money, that corruption found its way into the service of our people.
Yeah.
We do not want to live with the horror of the COVID-19 experience, where rather than helping our people, people are stealing. But we're saying let's work together and work together to make the difference that our people need.
Yeah. Thando, like I said earlier, it's oftentimes women that are disproportionately affected by crises like this because as the demographic numbers tell us that they often are the ones leading households in disproportionate levels and have to rebuild these communities, these homes as primary caregivers oftentimes. And that means our response to a crisis needs to meet that reality. Are we getting it right?
Well, I mean, first of all, I just want to mention the fact that SAWID itself was established in 2003, precisely because this group of visionary women wanted to preserve what we had been fighting for during apartheid and ensure that it finds expression within our democratic dispensation. And in as much as SAWID has for a number of years now been advocating and championing women's rights, the reality is that there is still a lot of systemic inequalities that we find in our society, particularly amongst black women, where black women are excluded from the economy. So, for instance, look at the situation where someone who is perhaps an informal trader or an independent entrepreneur no longer can trade on a daily basis because of the situation. So it's not just about people losing their lives, but it's about people who live hand to mouth no longer being able to bring in an income into their home. And for those who have been working for decades to be able to secure a home for themselves and for their children, to not be able to do so. And then on top of that, the reality is that we don't stop being human just because there's a natural disaster of this nature. Women are giving birth in the middle of these floods. Women who already don't have anything, who don't have menstrual products or hygiene products, continue to bleed during the floods. And so we have not seen much progress in the past 30 years insofar as women's place in society is concerned. But as SAWID, working with all of these organizations and coordinating this relief effort, we hope that we can buffer and mitigate the tremendous impact that a lot of women and children and families are going to feel.
What have you found to be perhaps some of the most immediate needs of those in a crisis like these, in a disaster like this, that you've attempted to address?
You'll be surprised, Oliver. It's really the basics. It's your clothing, it's food, especially non-perishable foods. It's your diapers. We all know how much diapers and nappies cost for babies in any case, never mind in this circumstance. We are not able to make money anymore. We need menstrual health products and dignity packs and baby formula as well. So these are the type of items. These are not complex items. These are the items that make sure that people are able, number one, to survive, but also that their dignity is maintained.
Yeah. Reverend Molo, how do you answer someone who, when a disaster like this happens, they ask the question, why me, Lord?
That is the perennial question that all of us engage when tragedy like this comes to us. Because part of the journey of being human, it is to ask how do we navigate and how do we find meaning, especially in catastrophic moments. So the first thing that I normally say to people who ask that question, I will say that is a perennial, even a scriptural question. Because my favorite writer, Job himself, cried out to God and say, why me, Lord? Why am I going through this thing? So the first thing I want to say to people who go through that thing, not to make the mistake that it is a reflection of their sinfulness. It will be a tragedy for anybody who goes through this moment and thinks it reflects their sinful. It does not. It reflects the contradictions that we live in. We are all living with the reality that the climate change is a serious issue that all of us need to give serious attention.
By the way, how do you begin to speak about that in a religious organization? Because it seems like such a non-religious issue, right? Unless, of course, we're talking about the biblical reigns of 40 days and 40 nights, which seems like exactly what happened in Limpopo.
Actually, you'll be surprised. It is a deeply theological question. Because what it says to us from the moment of creation and in the moment which those of us who know the narrative of the Garden of Eden, our responsibility was to take care of nature rather than to exploit it. And because we changed that narrative and we created a sense that human beings exist to exploit, extract, and therefore take advantage of, we have turned the thing upside down. Our responsibility is to care. When you're a steward of something, you care for it, so that in the caring for it, you live in a collaborative and healing relationship of mutuality. Nature itself now, the writer of Romans says, nature is the creation is groaning because we as human beings have allowed our greed and our selfishness to be the guide of how to exist in life. And as a result, the greed we exist with one another, when we exploit each other, either as women, either as black people, either as Palestinian people, when that greed drives us, we are going to find a way expressing that greed in how we live with nature. And therefore, it's a deeply theological question. But coming back to your issue, therefore, I want to say to everybody who's going through this thing, don't think this got a reflection on you as a person. This is the contradictions of how we live our lives and make choices we make. And therefore, God is consistent and in the side of those who are going through this tragic pain.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave it. Reverend Molo, Thando, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Advocate Thando Gumede is with the South African Women in Dialogue. Reverend Molo is with the South African Council of Churches.